The restaurant floor gleamed like black water, polished until every shoe left a ghost that vanished in seconds. For Luna, it was just another Tuesday shift, balancing plates, memorizing faces, enduring the invisible weight of being unseen. But when a billionaire in a gray suit sneered in Arabic, words he thought she couldn't understand, Luna answered back in his own language. What happened next didn't just shatter the silence of one table, it sparked a storm that would ripple from a corner restaurant in Manila to boardrooms, parliaments, and lives across the world. The first thing Luna noticed was the mirror-polished floor and how every pair of expensive shoes left a quick ghost of itself on the black marble before the attendants chased it away with quiet, practiced swipes. It was a Tuesday, yet Nocturne still glowed like a promise. You could see the city lights of Bonifacio High Street glittering through the glass walls, and beyond that, Manila's slow pulse. Tuesday meant the soft jazz trio, the sommelier who smiled like she knew your secrets, and Luna in her pressed white shirt and black waist apron, thinning calluses on her fingers from carrying plates heavier than some people's opinions. She wore her hair in a knot at the nape to keep it out of the wind of movement, and because her mother had once told her a knot of hair could be a knot of patience, on long nights she would tug the knot and breathe and think of shorelines. Tonight the whispers began before the food did, because the table by the corner window, that angular one you had to set with the extra long water glasses and the thin forks that looked like someone had drawn them in pencil, had been reserved under a single name, Rahman. The maitre d' had stood a touch straighter, practicing the particular tilt of head he used with those who had their names on buildings. Luna had seen it before, at Nocturne, at other places. She didn't flinch at it, she didn't flinch at much. When they came in, they brought with them a weather front of cologne and cold-blooded certainty. The one in front wore a gray suit the color of smoke that never leaves. He didn't wait to be seated so much as allow the chairs to arrive beneath him. His wristwatch caught the bar lights and threw them around like little suns. Two men followed him, and then a woman with a leather folio, and the table bloomed with devices, quiet laughter, expansive vowels. Luna took the table because Raphael, whose wrist was in a brace from a motorcycle mishap, needed to stick to lighter sections. She didn't mind. She liked the way wealth and hunger mixed. It was the same in the rich as in anyone else, if you paid attention, and she did. "Good evening," she said, letting the words land with just enough warmth to be felt. "Welcome to Nocturne. I'm Luna. Would you like still or sparkling water to start?" The man in the gray suit glanced up as if deciding whether to acknowledge a street light. His eyes were a careful storm. "Still," he said, then lifted one hand without looking to indicate everyone else would have the same. He continued to speak to the man on his right, his voice a low curve. To their left, the jazz trio eased into a brushed drum pattern. Luna set the water down, hand steady, noting the way his cuff had the faintest embroidery of initials. She gave them the menus and let them have a moment, then returned. "Can I answer any questions about the menu?" The gray suit, Rahman, she thought, though names on paper and names in the body are not always the same, lifted his eyes. "Do you have anything not sweet," he said, "not drenched in sugar like the rest of the city?" She had been asked worse things by kinder faces. "We have a roasted grouper with charred lemon and fennel that's very clean," she said, "and the sirloin is served with a mushroom just no sugar. The chef prefers balance." "Balance," he repeated almost to himself, as if the word were a menu item that might or might not be worth trying. Then he turned to the man with the shaved head and switched languages. At tables like this, words often arrived in English, carapaced and sharp, but these presented themselves in Arabic, soft at the edges, thick with desert heat, the syllables rolling like beads. Luna had not expected the shift, but she felt it like she felt a distant storm from a windowless room. She had the menus in her hands, and she was already turning to leave because they always spoke. The trick to being a good waitress was to somehow be there before they needed you, and also invisible while they talked. Then, because the words were not for her, they found her anyway. "Inserlee," he said with a chuckle that didn't use his eyes. "Look at her. How nervous she looks. Plakeert hom and ikun, al gelf manjali, len hen te lul goo." Certainly she dreams of being on a magazine cover, but here she is carrying plates. He didn't lower his voice at all. He didn't need to, because he didn't imagine anyone at this table but him could understand. The shaved-head man responded with a chortle. Even the woman with the folio allowed herself a smirk that was gone as quickly as a stray hair smoothed back into place. There was a tone in the words, a casual insolence, the way people talk when they don't believe the world can hear them talking about it. Luna's hand tightened around the menus. She could feel their weight grow deliciously, dangerously heavy, like stones in a small sling. But she was also aware of the small choreography of the restaurant. Raphael was passing her with a tray of oysters. The sommelier was mid-pour at table 5. Someone at the bar laughed too loudly. She drew a breath and let it leave, like she had taught herself to do in apartments with thin walls and mornings with crowded buses. She smiled the way she'd learned to when she first arrived in Dubai at 19 after 7 months of studying online and 10 years of listening to OFW cousins return with new syllables stuck to their tongues. There are many ways to learn a language. One of them is needing to. The gray suit continued. "Ich bin Hollandsjön and Yukunwernikin. Middelgeurdefi LT. I love to see people like this trying to be elegant, like monkeys in suits." He sipped his water and smacked his lips a little, as if tasting the ice. "Telbelum shayan bazitan, listunf melakil of yashel." Order them something simple. They can't understand complexity anyway. It was a peculiar sensation, hearing words slide into your ears that were not meant to live there. She could have been stone. She chose to be river. When she turned back, the menus perfectly aligned, she caught his eye. Not hard, not challenging, just a brief click of attention so that what came next could land in a place it could be understood. "Blinsba el-Jabbar," she said, the syllables easy in her mouth, like a song remembered. "And betmesh bbtht tsbh hofdbia titmend of flewen symmetricu lqt ldkchen dhrm shian kf yemkanian tlb men elshif an yizil lkushru Teeman, YQDMH, FWQ, SLT, SUMR, FQT. For the grouper, we slow roast it until the edges are golden, then add charred lemon to cut the fat. If you want something lighter, I can ask the chef to skip the crust entirely and present it over fennel salad only. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It was as if the table tipped a little and everything on it slid a centimeter toward her. The woman with the folio blinked twice, her mouth doing a small fish impression before remembering its shape. The shaved-head man leaned back as if a car had braked suddenly. The gray suit, Raymond, allowed himself a fraction of a smile that did not belong to the joke. He lifted his chin. "Dinrbia? You speak Arabic?" Luna made the kind of shrug that is also a bow. "Claylenf QT." Just a little. He watched her more closely now, like a collector who had mistaken a painting for a print and was realizing the brushstrokes were live. "Menhin? Where?" "Memandel Enskthiemps LMKN." "From people more than place," she said. "LLJUTS TLTSQBA determth." Language sticks to you if you respect it. She didn't explain the nights she had stayed up translating YouTube cooking tutorials for a woman who worked in Dira and missed her son. She didn't say she had once done 3 weeks on a construction site as a temp to manage the bosses and the workers, because the only person who could move information between them had gotten sick. She did not tell him about her brother Marco, who had learned greetings in 6 languages because he sold bottled water through jeepney windows. She didn't say either that while she was learning Arabic, the words had taught her back. Patience, precision, the music under a sentence. "Very well," he said in English, a small concession to the public they were in. His smile was now a measuring tape rolled out of its case. "Bring us your balance, the grouper and the sirloin, and the whiskey, your best." Luna nodded and walked away because you don't win or lose at once in rooms like this. You accumulate. She put the order in and leaned on the stainless steel counter in the kitchen, where heat hung in a kind of loving violence. Chef Raoul looked up with his eyes that were always laughing at something he hadn't told anyone else yet. "You look like you swallowed a lemon whole," he said, not unkindly. She told him the order, told him about the crust, told him about the whiskey, and then, in the space between things, about the Arabic. He let out a low whistle that had a smile inside it. "You are a knife wrapped in linen, Luna," he said. "Go slice something important." The food came out the color of answers. She delivered it with grace that looked effortless because it was trained effort, used over and over, until it became muscle. The gray suit was quiet now, the words at the table thinner, the English back. Only once as she poured his whiskey did he lean slightly toward her. "There is a word," he said, "for what you did." "Yes," she agreed. "Respect." He let the smile finally reach the place where it should have started. "Exactly. You might think that was the end, a small moment to tell your friends about, a tiny clip of triumph in a night piled with plates. But stories like these do not exist, so they can end the moment you feel good. They have longer intentions. They set hooks. The hooks came an hour later, when the room had settled into its middle breath and the bar's ice machine buzzed its repetitive song. The woman with the folio had vanished to a phone call. The shaved head man was buttering his words to the sommelier. The gray suit was looking out at the city as if it were a chart to read. When the woman returned, her face was the kind you see on people who have realized a number has changed in a place they did not expect. She leaned down and hissed something into his ear. He frowned, the expression not sitting comfortably on him. He said something back, English at first, then he swerved into Arabic so he could be precise. "Mastil," he said. "Impossible. El imkan an yitzptilium, elst el. This cannot leak today. The press will go mad." Luna did not mean to listen, but the place words are not meant to go is often exactly where they end up. The woman flipped her folio open, swore softly under her breath. The shaved head man was nodding too fast. There were names of a hospital chain, of a shell company, of a closing date tomorrow morning at 9. There was a sentence, sharp as a blade. Euclin el shirka lf binid telemisti rutb. It is said the Filipino company we want is involved in wage issues. Then, more quietly, WDH Kaharja, Glan, Twin, and Snrmi, Tib Romardit, Men LML. And if this gets out now, they think we'll throw doctors and nurses out of work. This was what the money at this table was buying. An underprice, a route around protests, a clean press release about streamlining. He wasn't wrong about the press. In Manila, rumors were a second season. Luna felt the air in her lungs do something strange, a reshaping. She could have stood there and let the sound pass over her like heat from the oven. She could have told herself she was, after all, a waitress, and people would do what they would, and money would move like a river cut stone. She could have. She almost did. Then she caught sight of herself in the mirror that hugged the back of the bar, the knot of hair, the eyes she had learned to keep soft so people would feel safe talking near them. She thought of her mother, who sent back a handbag a wealthy employer had given her as a tip because, as she wrote in a careful script, "I do not care for something that smells like shame." She thought of Marco, whose school fees were often almost possible, and of her friend Layla, who worked night shift at a private clinic and had once fallen asleep waiting for a jeepney and woken up with her tote bag missing and her hands still folded like prayer. Luna stepped into the small space between tables that always felt like a secret tunnel. She set down her tray on the station, smoothed her apron. No one saw her approach because when a woman like her approaches, rooms don't remember she exists until she speaks. She spoke. Mr. Rahman, she said, English now, clear as a bell that belongs to a school, you asked for balance. May I serve some to you that is not a fish? The gray suit turned. He was curious now in a way that did not immediately decide between offense and amusement. You are not on the menu, he said. No, she said, but I am on the floor, and the floor hears. You are trying to put something delicate on a table that cannot take any more weight. There are better tables. There are better ways. This is the moment where many men would become wind, pushing everything out of their path. He chose to be granite first. You believe you can counsel me on better ways? She didn't move closer. He had already given her enough attention. You speak Arabic to hide the shape of your thoughts. I learned Arabic to make the shape of mine. The company you want is in trouble for not paying its people. You pay a little less for the building when you take something broken, yes? But when you take it, you inherit the brokenness. That sticks to you. It changes the way people receive your press releases, the way doctors look at your private ambulance when it parks outside the ER. You know this. You simply have not had someone in this room say it to you in a way you cannot pretend not to have heard. Now the amusement arrived, thin as the edge of a paper. And what would you suggest? Luna not on the menu. Pay the arrears, she said. Make that your first move. Announce that you have audited wages and corrected them. Make it boring, not dramatic. Meet with union reps and bring coffee. If you are going to shorten staff, do not do it with the words Horton in your mouth. Don't fire anybody in August. Manila breaks in August. Announce scholarships for nurses. Not 1, 50. And don't make the application a labyrinth. Allow people to attach their dreams without blood. Hire a PR firm whose first instinct isn't fireworks. Make it look like care because it is care. And if you are not going to do care, then do not buy at all. It is risky to say the thing. It has always been. But there is a specific power in someone who has carried heavy plates all night, opening her palm and letting down the weight of words that could also cut. Around them, the room kept moving. The jazz trio had slipped from one song to another. 2 tables over, a couple in their 50s were holding hands like teenagers. The outside world still spun its slow coin. But at the corner table, something shifted. The shaved head man was scowling in the kind of way that meant his math had been interrupted. The woman with the folio was looking at Luna in that bright, assessing way of women not accustomed to being surprised and liking it when they are. And the gray suit was still. What is your name? He asked, as if the question were a coin he had been saving. Luna. Luna, he repeated. He tried it on like a tie. You have a lot of opinions for someone who carries plates. She smiled. I carry more than plates. A small beat, then something you could have called a laugh if you didn't care about definitions. He leaned back. Very well, Luna. Let us say I do these things, and if I don't. Then I hope your watch is waterproof, she said calmly, because you will be trying to row in a storm while wearing it. The shaved head man flashed some teeth that had never seen cavities. Is this a threat? It's weather, she said. I'm just telling you the forecast. The gray suit had not taken his eyes off her. And why would you care? He asked, genuinely curious now. Why would you give counsel to someone who called you a monkey in a suit? She did not look away. Because I'm fluent in more than one language, she said. English, Arabic, hunger. Because if you do it badly, my friend Layla feels it. Because my brother Marco may need that scholarship. Because the money you move is not abstract to us, it's air sometimes. Sometimes it's the ground. The woman with the folio closed it, perhaps for the first time since the night began. Mr. Rahman, she said softly, the wage arrears number is small compared to the PR risk. That's how it starts, you know, with a small sentence, like a hinge. He relaxed minutely, the granite choosing to become river. Fine, he said. We'll pay the arrears. We'll do it before 9. The scholarships. Come back to me with a number. The shaved head man pushed back. Karim. He held up a hand. We'll do it, he said, still looking at Luna, as if she were an instrument he was testing. Then, almost despite himself, would you like a different job than this one? Here is a thing that might surprise. Luna did not immediately glow. She did not, however, dim. A different job. She had been making one for years out of hours she did not have. She had written a plan on an old laptop for a small language training platform geared toward returnees and those leaving, for Gulf Arabic and Gulf culture, because she knew where the friction points were, where the misunderstandings became missed pay or bruised dignity. She had named the idea Bait, a house, a verse, a place words lived, and she had told exactly no one who could give her money for it because she had never seen someone like her sit at a table where money was given for ideas. "What kind of job?" she asked, not coy, precise. "I don't know," he admitted, "but one where you are not, as you say, carrying more than plates without being paid for it. Come have coffee with my team tomorrow at 10. "I work the lunch shift," she said, "and I'm raising my nephew on Wednesdays. I can come at 4. His mouth twitched. "You could call it respect putting on its jacket. 4, then?" Things don't string themselves together perfectly simply because a rich man says a time. The next morning, one of their cars arrived at Nocturne staff entrance, and the driver asked for a Luna, like he was trying to buy a perfume with a name he couldn't pronounce. She declined the ride. She took the bus because she knew Manila better by bus than by back seat. She wore a blouse that knew how to behave and shoes that had been polished over other lives. At 4, she arrived at a conference room made of glass and polite eucalyptus. There were 6 people with laptops already open and a tray of cookies no one thought they ate. The woman with the folio introduced herself as Maya Reyes and shook Luna's hand with the kind of firmness that says, "I am not the most dangerous person in this room, but I am the most prepared." The shaved-head man had a first name, it turned out, Victor. He looked at her like she was a draft he was not sure he wanted to approve. Karim, Mr. Rahman, sat at the head and let the room bend around him. "You have 10 minutes, he said. "Tell me the storm forecast if we screw this up, and tell me something better than the storm." Luna did what she did the night before. She did it without apology and without heat. She laid out what a headline looked like if wages were discovered late, the words callous and foreign and strip. She drew the shape of a quieter path. She showed them, because she had prepared a document, because she had learned that a woman with only words is inevitably accused of having none. The steps, the partners, the phone numbers, the church pastors to call who knew every family with a nurse in it. The way to get a story into the right community pages and not the loud ones. When she finished, it was quiet in the way rooms are when they've been given something they didn't know they needed. "And the other question?" Karim asked. "The better than storm?" She placed a single page on the table, Bite. The logo was just a word drawn by her nephew in pencil, traced over in a calmer hand. "This," she said, "a house for the words people need when they go where you build. Visual modules for greetings, for pay disputes, for contracts, a hotline on Viber, a set of in-person sessions on Saturdays, one in Quezon City, one in Alabang, led by returned OFWs. We pay them. There's dignity in being the teacher of what taught you, and all of it plugged into your acquisitions in the Gulf. You get smoother onboarding, lower turnover, less misunderstanding. People aren't as angry when someone they love can ask for their day off correctly in the right language." Victor's laugh had a knife in it, the friendly kind. "You're proposing we fund classes to help people negotiate better with us. I'm proposing you fund something so that when you say you care about people, you can point to something that is not a billboard," she said. "And I am proposing that your HR headaches become fewer." "Why would you be the one to build it?" Maya asked, not unkindly. "Because I already have," Luna said and put down a thumb drive. "Pilot, 15 women, 3 months, 0 dropouts. We paid them with a cut of a bake shop's profit. I don't need your money to prove it works. I need your money to make it reach." There are times in rooms like this when everyone looks to the man at the head to tell them what they think. Karim watched the document as if there were a small bird perched on it he didn't want to startle. "How much?" he asked. She had thought long about this too. A number too small meant condescension, a handshake. Too large meant greed, the kind she could not afford. She gave a number. It was not unreasonable. It was not safe. He nodded slowly. "We'll do it," he said. "Pilot." The word pilot is often optimism dressed as caution, but sometimes it is simply the size a dream needs to be in the beginning to avoid breaking itself. She left the building feeling like a tuning fork, humming, a little terrified. She got on a bus and watched the city go by like it always did. A thicket of billboards, the sudden grace of a kid doing a backflip into muddy water, a tricycle driver asleep with his head against his handlebars. She got home and untied her hair and made rice and sardines and a cucumber salad that would remind them of a cooler place. Marco did his homework and asked her what algebra was for, and she told him the truth. It teaches you that things hidden on one side of an equal sign can be coaxed out if you are gentle and stubborn. The next days were full. The company announced its payment of wage arrears early and plainly, and the storm that had been gathering dispersed into a rain that barely wet anyone. The scholarships were announced, 50 to start, then 75 when they realized that 50 is a good photo. But a better story is, we kept going. People made jokes about rich men suddenly discovering the floor, but they made them alongside something like, not exactly gratitude, not exactly suspicion, but a new kind of attention. Bait began in a room borrowed from a church with an air conditioner that sounded like it had been smoking secretly for years. The returned OFWs arrived on time. The first Saturday, a young man who was leaving for Riyadh in 2 months learned how to say, "Sir, I would like to send money home regularly to my mother without fees." He practiced it until the word stopped being a rope in his mouth and became a road. Karim showed up once, quietly, standing in the back, his jacket folded over his arm, his eyes softer than they had been the night at the restaurant. He didn't speak, didn't call attention to himself, which was in itself a miracle. He watched a woman named Jen recite a phrase she might need with her employer and struggle at the last consonant, then finally get it and light up in a way that made the room feel like it had been plugged in. On his way out, he stopped by Luna. "You were right," he said simply. "I am sometimes," she said, which was the most victory she allowed into her mouth. They didn't become friends. That would be a different story. But the line between them grew taut and respectful. Once they argued hard about a clause in an Arabic contract that, if read too generously, would have allowed an employer to hold a worker's passport for safekeeping. He had said it was standard. She had said it was theft with a handkerchief on its face. They went back and forth in a torrent of Arabic that startled an entire room of people who had only ever heard the language used to tell them where the sugar was. She won. He admitted she had. There was laughter afterward, the relieved kind, and then coffee. Nocturne was not a footnote in all of this. It stayed as a place where two things had happened and continued to happen. People ate expensive fish, and someone had been seen. The story made its way around the staff, then around the city, as things do when they have teeth and hope. People told the story to make themselves feel taller, and to remind themselves that the tallest person in the room is not always the one with the watch. The jazz trio learned a new song that had an Arabic scale hidden in its middle. The maitre d' stopped practicing the head tilt with quite so much fervor. Raphael got his brace off and carried more than he should and was told off by everyone who loved him. Sometimes Luna returned to that corner table when it was empty and looked out at the city the way he had, as if it were a chart you could read. Maybe you cannot read a city like a chart, but you can hold it like a book you were writing, and that was enough. She thought often of the first words he had said about her, the ugliness of them, the way they had assumed her smallness. It would have been easy to use their memory to build a dagger or a wall. Instead, she used them as scaffolding. Let the thing you hate teach you where the strength is supposed to go, into building, not into breaking. Some months later, a video began to make the rounds. Someone had filmed the moment at the restaurant from a distance, just a little, the audio not perfect, the Arabic mostly glimpsed, then the English clear. The internet lit up the way it knows how, with glee, with fury, with 100,000 opinions poured into cups that could not hold them. Luna hated and loved this. She did not want to be a symbol, but she understood that sometimes a symbol is exactly what makes someone else find the door reporters called. She ignored most. She agreed to one, the kind of journalist who asked questions like keys, not like knives. She sat with her on a bench by the park and said two things she wanted to float in the air where others could catch them. 1. Respect is a language everybody understands. 2. People think fluency is about your mouth. It is also about your spine. If you want a neat moral, you can have one. Don't insult people in languages they might speak. Don't assume people who carry plates can't carry more. These are true and also too small for what happened. What happened was that a girl taught herself a language because the world told her she would not need it, and she needed it, and then the world learned what it sounds like when the assumption in a room is asked to sit down and listen. What happened is that money, for once, listened to the floor. What happened is that a storm was warned and then avoided, and something like weather that helped crops grow was invited instead. On the anniversary of Bates' first class, the team put up a small bulletin board on the wall. They wrote nothing on it. In the weeks that followed, photographs began to appear. People in high-visibility vests, in nurse whites, in abayas, in kitchen hairnets, all holding up slips of paper with words they had learned that had helped them. Strya break. Shkran thank you. QD contract. RTB salary. Next to each was a short story of a conversation that had gone differently because someone had the sentence they needed. One photo showed Jen, who had struggled with a consonant and then got it. She was squinting in the sun in Jeddah, holding a paper that said, Hrin, freedom. Below it, 2 lines. I got my passport back. It was just a conversation. A hard one, but a conversation. Kareem did not come to the party. He sent a card and a donation and a note that was 4 words long. It said, keep making me better. He had meant the company. Luna took it to mean the man, too, and the city, and the conversation between them all. People continued to come into Nocturne wearing watches that could pay 3 months of rent if sold to the right cousin. People continued to eat fish, to fall in love, to forget to tip and then remember. Not everything was nicer. Not everything was now balanced. The world is the world, marked by its holes. But one night, a man in a suit said something in a language he assumed no one else could understand about a busboy's hands, and Luna, passing, said gently in the same language, we never know who understands us. And the man turned and looked at her, and then at his own fingers, and said more quietly, no, we don't. On her way home that night, the bus lights made little pools in the dark, and Luna's reflection was a ghost that smiled at her in the window. She thought of the girl sitting on a thin mattress years ago, practicing the way to say please without sounding like Velcro. She thought of a man with a gray suit and a watch who had mistaken a room for a mirror. She thought of the knots her mother had told her to tie in her hair and the way patience and dignity can be learned, the way you learn conjugations. She got off 2 stops early and walked the rest of the way so that she could feel under her feet the small clatter of the world righting itself a little. People who like grand endings would be disappointed to know that most good endings are quiet. They're the click of a door that now closes smoothly where it used to grind. They're an email that says approved. They're someone breathing easier. They are a waitress who is also a founder walking up a set of stairs that need repainting and thinking about 2 schedules, the dinner rush and Saturday class, and feeling tired in a way that is honest and alive. She slept well these days. There were still nights when she woke at 3, and the old worries walked around her bed dragging their chains, rent, tuition, a mother far away with a cough that might be weather and might be more. But then she would remember a sentence, and it would be an amulet. HTRM. Respect. She would say it out loud in the dark, softly, and the word would make a little room around her, and she would step into it and stay. In the morning, she would boil water for coffee and knot her hair and step back into the language of the world, fluent enough to survive, fluent enough to make it kinder. On a Sunday, months after the night with the gray suit, Luna took Marco to the park with a kite they had made from old plastic bags, strong tape, and the thin rods from the spine of a broken umbrella. They ran across the grass, dodging a soccer game and a family barbecue, and watched as the kite climbed into the sky with the kind of authority that doesn't require permission. Looking up, she thought of how people make meanings out of the things they tie together with what they have. Strings, words, plans, anger turned to maps. She gave the string to Marco and he held it like it was a living thing, which it was. He looked up, mouth open, and then down at her, as if to check that the sky was real and not a trick. It was, of course, both. "Do you think it will fall?" he asked, voice unsure and awed. "Everything falls," she said, and then squeezed his shoulder. "But look how long it flies." The weeks after that quiet dinner meeting with Karim's team unfolded like an entirely new season in Luna's life, though she never could have named when the shift began. She had gone from being invisible in the corners of restaurants to being a voice seated at polished tables, her words written down in tidy bullet points by assistants who had once looked at her only long enough to ask for coffee. And yet she never let herself forget that she still tied her apron strings most mornings and still called out table numbers in a voice that had learned to rise above clattering glass. Bait, the program she had once scribbled into an old notebook by candlelight, was no longer just a secret idea folded between shifts. It was growing. On Saturdays, the borrowed church hall filled with women and men who had futures carved into their faces, some with nervous hope, some with the hard lines of too many disappointments, and Luna taught them how to say the words that kept dignity alive. She wrote the Arabic words on whiteboards in neat strokes, but she also made them practice posture, tone, how to ask for time off without letting fear bend their shoulders. She told them, "Fluency is not only in the mouth, it is here," and she pressed a hand to her spine until the room understood. Karim's money funded the materials, the stipends for the returned workers, who became teachers themselves, the rented rooms. But Luna insisted on choosing every facilitator herself. She wanted only those who remembered hunger and disrespect, because they would not forget what it felt like to be voiceless. At first, Karim dropped in occasionally, standing at the back with his unreadable expression, listening as young men and women rehearsed how to say, "My salary has not been paid," or "This is my day of rest," in clear, practiced Arabic. But one afternoon he surprised her by rolling up his sleeves and sitting cross-legged with the group, repeating after Luna with an accent so heavy it made the class laugh, but they clapped for him anyway. Later, when she teased him about mispronouncing a simple word, he had smiled and said, "I am fluent in power, not patience. That is why I come here, to learn patience." But power, as always, did not remain silent. The first strike came not from outside, but from within Karim's circles. A glossy magazine published an article about his unexpected philanthropic endeavors, painting Beatty as a charming vanity project of a billionaire trying to soften his image. The photo they used showed him shaking hands with a priest outside the church hall. Luna's name was not mentioned, but the story felt like theft all the same, like someone had peeled her work away from its bones and hung it in a gallery for the rich to admire without understanding. She confronted him about it, her voice trembling not with fear, but with fury. "You promised me this would not be about you," she said. "If they erase me from this story, what lesson are we teaching, that only money gives things value?" He listened, hands folded, then quietly slid another magazine across the table. This one had not been planted. It had been written by a local journalist who had attended a Saturday session in secret, sitting in the back row with a notebook on his lap. His article was not glossy. It was raw. It described Luna's words, the way the class had leaned forward to catch them, the way a woman practicing "I need my passport returned" had wept halfway through and been comforted by strangers. At the end of the piece, the journalist had written, The most powerful person in this room was not the billionaire at the door, but the waitress at the whiteboard. Luna's throat had tightened when she read it. Karim had only nodded. "Power shifts," he said. "Sometimes slower than we like, but it shifts." Yet the shifting drew enemies. Not everyone in Karim's network approved of his newfound interest in wages and dignity. Contracts that had once slid easily across desks began to meet delays. Old partners muttered about sentiment clouding his judgment. One evening, as Luna cleared a table after the late dinner rush, a man in a pressed suit she had never seen before lingered by the bar, swirling his whiskey until she approached. "You're the waitress, aren't you?" he said, his smile sharp. "The one who thinks she can tell billionaires how to spend their money?" She stiffened, but kept her voice even. "I don't tell anyone what to do. I only say what I see." He leaned closer. "Careful what you see. Some people don't like being looked at too closely." Then he left, his words trailing like smoke. That night she lay awake, listening to her nephew breathe in the next room, the ceiling fan clicking like a warning clock. She had stepped into something vast and dangerous, she knew, but she also knew that silence had already stolen too much from too many. The test came months later, when Bite was invited to present at a labor rights forum attended by government officials, journalists, and foreign investors. Karim wanted her to lead. "You are the reason this exists," he said. But Luna almost refused. She pictured the rows of cameras, the polished men in suits who would hear her accent and dismiss her as provincial, the headlines that might twist her words. Yet when Saturday came, and she saw the faces of her students, women in headscarves, men in faded jackets, all clutching their practice sheets like passports into another kind of life, she knew she had to go. She wore the same knot in her hair, the same plain white blouse she wore at Nocturne. When she walked onto the stage, the microphone trembled in its stand, but her voice did not. She spoke of hunger, of benches in courtrooms, of passports locked in drawers, of voices that had learned to shrink. She spoke in English, then in Arabic, then in Tagalog, weaving languages like threads into a rope that everyone in the room could feel. She ended with one sentence that made the air hold still. "Respect is not a luxury. It is the minimum wage of the human soul." The silence after was thick, then broke into applause that did not sound polite but urgent, like a storm breaking. Karim watched from the front row, and for once his eyes did not measure. They softened, but not all hands clapped. In the days that followed, Bate was accused online of radicalizing workers, of encouraging disobedience. Anonymous accounts spread rumors about Luna's past, painting her as an opportunist, a fraud. Someone even circulated a photo of her carrying plates at Nocturne, mocking her for pretending to be more than a waitress. She read the comments late one night, her hands shaking. Then she saw the replies, students, returnees, even strangers, writing in Arabic, in English, in Tagalog. "She taught me how to ask for my pay. She gave me my voice back. She is not pretending. She is fluent in respect." The tide once again shifted. Years later, when Bate had grown into a network across 3 countries, when Luna had long since left her apron behind but kept it folded in a drawer as a reminder, a journalist asked her in an interview how it all began. She smiled, remembering a night of jazz and whiskey, of Arabic words not meant for her ears, of a moment when silence had seemed like the safest choice. "It began," she said softly, "the night I answered back." The applause from that labor forum did not end when Luna stepped off stage. It followed her into the streets, into the way strangers looked at her with sudden recognition, into the cautious phone calls from reporters who wanted her to repeat her sentences into their microphones. But recognition is a double-edged blade. For every voice that praised her, there was another sharpening against her, muttering about waitresses who overstepped, about women who thought language could undo contracts signed with blood and golf games. Karim warned her the morning after the speech. "You have shifted the air," he said, pouring coffee into cups that still steamed between them. "Air makes people breathe easier, but it also stirs dust. Do not be surprised when people choke. She smiled at his metaphor, but felt the truth in it. Within a week, an editorial appeared in a business journal calling Bate a destabilizing force. Its author, a man with a name familiar from Karim's earlier partnerships, argued that teaching domestic workers and nurses too much confidence risked economic fallout. Luna read the article on her phone during a jeepney ride, her nephew asleep against her shoulder. The words made her blood run hot. She wasn't destabilizing anything. She was balancing it. The pushback grew. A local politician, embarrassed that Bate was drawing more praise abroad than his own reforms, publicly questioned its funding. He demanded transparency, implying corruption where there was none. Karim's lawyers prepared a response, but Luna insisted on writing her own statement. In plain language, she explained every peso, every donation, every receipt. She ended it with, "Our students are our auditors. They measure us in trust, not currency." It was shared more widely than the accusation. Still, the storm kept circling. Then came the night that nearly broke her. She was locking the doors of the church hall after a late class when she found a note slipped under the threshold. The handwriting was hurried, jagged. It read, "Stop teaching them. You don't know who you are challenging." No signature, no address, just a threat shaped into words. Her knees trembled as she held the paper. For a moment she thought of quitting, of folding Bate back into the drawer where her apron lay. But then she thought of Jen, of the boy practicing how to send money home, of her nephew asleep at home. She tore the note into 4 pieces and dropped them into the trash. The next morning she taught as usual, but Karim noticed the tightness around her eyes. He confronted her gently, in the garden outside his office. "What happened?" he asked. She hesitated, then handed him the scraps she had retrieved from the trash. His face hardened. "They will not scare you," he said, "not while I live." Luna shook her head. "It is not your fight to shield me from. Respect cannot be bodyguarded. It has to stand on its own." That night, however, he doubled security around Bates' classes. Volunteers walked students home in groups. He did not say it aloud, but she knew it was his way of keeping a promise. The storm reached its peak when Bate was invited to testify at a parliamentary hearing about migrant workers' rights. The chamber was cold, lined with microphones, cameras glaring like watchful eyes. Luna sat at the table, her papers neatly stacked, though her palms were damp. Karim sat behind her, silent but present, his watch ticking in the quiet. The questioning began politely. But soon one congressman, known for his disdain of soft reforms, leaned forward. "Miss Luna," he said, voice dripping with patronage, "do you really believe teaching a few phrases of Arabic will change the economic order? Or is this just performance, a waitress's fantasy dressed in policy clothes?" Her chest tightened. The insult was meant to shrink her, to remind the room of her place. But she remembered the whiteboard, the voices repeating after her, the way respect had sounded in their mouths. She lifted her chin. "Sir," she replied calmly, "language is not fantasy. It is contract. It is how people ask for pay, refuse abuse, claim a day of rest. To you, it is just words. To us, it is survival. And if survival is destabilizing, then perhaps the order needs to change." The room went still. The cameras caught every syllable. Karim's lips twitched in the faintest smile. The hearing ended not in humiliation, but in applause from the gallery. And though policy moved slowly, Bate was suddenly written into reports, discussed in editorials, requested in other regions. But what mattered most to Luna was not the headlines. It was the Saturday when a student ran into the hall, waving a letter, her eyes wet. "They gave me my passport back," she cried. "I asked in Arabic, just like you taught me, and they gave it back." The class erupted in cheers. Luna stood still, her chest aching with something larger than joy. Karim watched her from the doorway. Later he said quietly, "This is no longer just survival. This is history." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Years later, when Bait had branches in 3 countries and a team of teachers who carried its flame forward, Luna often returned to that memory, the courtroom where she first answered back, the billionaire who had mocked her in a language he thought was his alone, the moment she turned silence into a storm. And when people asked her how she endured the threats, the doubts, the nights when fear pressed against her chest like a weight, she always answered the same. "Because someone once called me a monkey in a suit," she would say softly, and I chose not to believe it. I chose to answer back. The day after the hearing, Manila woke up in the language of rain. Sheets of it came down over Market, softened the shouting at jeepney stops, rinsed dust off bougainvillea and billboard and balcony. Luna left the window open anyway because she liked the way the air smelled when it had done something difficult and come away cleaner. Her nephew snored softly on the fold-out couch. She held a mug with both hands and read through the messages that had grown all night like vines, some coiled and thready with spite, some flowering, most simple and human. Thank you. I tried it and it worked. I told them in Arabic I am going home at 10, and they said okay, like that. The sentences were small and enormous both. She wanted to frame each one and hang it where rain couldn't touch it. At 10, after seeing Marco off with an umbrella, he would definitely leave on the bus. She went to the church hall early. She liked the quiet before people came. It had the tone of a held breath, a promise about to be delivered. She set up chairs and whiteboards and packets, with phrases that were boring on paper and electric in mouths that had been shut a long time. She taped to the back wall a new poster Marco had designed, Bait, in simple black letters, and under it, in 3 languages, a line that had come to her in the night, like a visitor who did not knock. "We teach you to say what you already knew you deserved." Karim arrived late, unheard, until the door clicked softly closed. He was not in a suit. He wore a blue shirt that did not try too hard and made him look more like a person than a person-shaped company. He set a bag of Pandasal on the table and poured coffee, which he did just a little wrong, like he always did when he insisted on making it himself. He watched her tape corners down. He watched the way she smoothed the paper after. "You are quiet," he said. "I am saving my voice for the room." "Save some for me," he said, then, lighter, "so you can correct my accent." The room filled, as it always did, with a tide of faces. Today there were more than usual. Some looked like they had run here. Some had the careful hunger of people who have learned to take help like medicine. Grateful, cautious, always scanning for side effects. Luna began, their attention falling into her voice like coins into a well. She never spoke above a certain volume. She learned early in Nocturne that volume did not create respect. Silence could, if you held it correctly. So she taught them greetings, the ones that opened doors, and refusals, the ones that kept you whole, and she told them the truth. You cannot win every fight with a sentence, but you can diminish the number of fights that eat you alive. At the break, a young man stood near the coffee table, holding a cup like it might scald him through the paper. He was new, hair clipped close, eyes that had done too much math lately, with the parts of life that should resist calculation. He spoke in Tagalog at first, halting. Then, "Ma'am Luna," in English, because he had learned that important sentences sometimes wanted to wear it. "My employer says if I use Arabic with his family, I am taking advantage, that I should only know enough to be respectful." She could feel anger begin its climb, then flatten itself like a coin under a train. She set the coin aside. "Do you know what advantage means?" she asked, "in Arabic?" He blinked, shook his head. "It is an Arabic word, too," she said, repeating it in Arabic. "It can mean vantage point, a place with a better view. Your employer is telling you to keep your eyes low, to stay where you cannot see what is being done to you or around you. Your learning language does not rob him. It lifts you to a place where you can see the shape of your life. If he cannot stand beside you there, then he is admitting he prefers you blind. He looked at his cup like it had changed shape. Then he lifted his eyes in a way she recognized. It was not a miracle, it was a recalibration. Karim saw that the way her words did surgery, without leaving scars. He stood back and let it happen. He was learning that his presence could be a shadow if he stood in the wrong place. He was learning how to make his absence part of the help. When the session ended, he came forward not for the audience, but for the teachers, the returned workers, who had chosen to let their difficult years become maps for others. He thanked each of them in Arabic and Tagalog both, fumbling, correcting himself, when Luna shook her head, laughing when they teased him gently. This was not performance. He did not summon cameras. He did not harvest gratitude. He did what money is clumsy at. He gave his time inelegantly, honestly. He had learned that from the night she called him a river and a forecast. He would never say it aloud like that, but he knew. The day after the hearing, he had stood in a boardroom lined with chrome and frost, where men sprinkled their words with numbers, and found himself saying a sentence he might have mocked 6 months before. If it breaks them, we don't buy it. If it shames us, we don't touch it. One man had coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. Another had smiled like a knife, saying hello. Karim had met their eyes and continued. He had paid arrears in full, with interest. And he had not allowed the press release to use the word generosity once. He had told the PR team, if we call this charity, we are admitting we are God's. We are not. Pay for the air you breathed and the ground you stood on and call it by its name. He had watched the woman with the folio Maya redraft the language with a mouth that found new shapes and saved them. But moments of courage do not rewrite a man so completely that he does not rot in places he has not looked at yet. Karim still had the reflex to control. He still believed in numbers like they were saints. He still thought sometimes that if he wore his watch tight enough, it could keep the day from spilling. That year taught him what to do with these reflexes, not to kill them, but to collar them like half-wild dogs and teach them new tricks. Sit, stay, quiet, listen. The listening found a focus when the threats escalated from notes to something that looked like law. A man named De La Peña from a public integrity group filed a complaint alleging Byte had violated some clause of an education act that had not been enforced in years. The clause required organizations teaching vocational language courses to be licensed like private schools. It was an absurdity designed for glossy academies with glossy fees, not for a small program using chalk dust and respect as its curriculum, but absurdities have teeth when they come with stamps. A hearing was set. The newspapers split along their predictable seams. The congressman who had said, "Waitress said," Performance wrote a new op-ed about shadow educators. The Internet did its Internet. Bates' students kept coming anyway. Luna stood in front of the green-tinted window at the legal aid clinic Maya had found. She had her hair in a knot and her breath in its harness. She did not want to ask Karim to handle this, though a part of her longed to let someone else hold the tangle for once. When he offered, gentle and matter-of-fact, "We will have the best counsel. You will not walk into that room alone," she said. "I will walk in beside you, not behind." He smiled with something like pride, something like apology. "Beside," he agreed. The hearing day dawned with that particular Manila heat that seems less like temperature and more like an argument with the sun. The building smelled like a mixture of floor cleaner and old paper, the same scent as every office anywhere that thinks itself powerful. In the room, a panel of 3 sat behind a table with microphones whose red lights looked like tiny, stern eyes. De La Peña sat on the other side, precisely groomed, his smile like a lesson in how not to. He spoke of regulatory frameworks, of public safety, of the need for standards. The language was so careful, it sounded like it had been wrapped in tissue paper and placed in a box. Luna let it wash over her. She had learned in restaurants that sound can exhaust you if you try to catch every piece. When it was her turn, The lawyer leaned toward her to whisper a thing about posture she did not need. Her posture had always been unassailable. She spoke, calm. The same as in the forum, less performance, more diagnosis. She explained that Bate did not grant degrees. It granted sentences. It did not hire professors. It paid returned workers to teach what life had already taught them. She did not apologize for not being a school. She did not ask to be legalized. She asked them to see where their law had been asleep and why it should not wake just to punish a quiet thing that healed. One panelist asked in a voice that had probably made children she had never met cry, "Miss Luna, if your program is so necessary, why haven't others like it existed before?" She said, without any reach for eloquence, "Because no one gave them rooms." Outside after, Karim stood with both hands in his pockets, like a man who had given up the comfort of putting them on the wheel. He had spoken too, short, precise, a good use of his voice, but he had found that in rooms like this, his sighs can stand over what needs to be heard. He had stepped back when he felt it. He was learning. They walked to the lot. The shaved-head man, Victor, was leaning against a car he could not afford without Karim's past deals. He had worked for Karim once and had drifted away when empathy became a line item. "You have changed, Karim," he said, not as it as a compliment. "You are letting the floor tell you where to walk." "Maybe the floor is the only thing that knows where it's safe to step," Karim said. Victor's smile did not reach his eyes. "Floors get wiped, remember that." He pushed off the car and was gone. Later, Karim would remember those words and understand them as prophecy and threat both. The decision came a week later. BITE was recognized as a community education program exempt from private school regulations, as long as it posted schedules and maintained basic safety protocols. It was a victory that tasted simple and right. Luna celebrated by buying 3 new dry erase markers and letting Marco choose the colors like he was choosing the future. They did not notice right away that the real danger had shifted. The threats stopped coming as notes. They came as silence. Someone began to refuse Bate access to certain neighborhoods. Barangay captains, who had been friendly, suddenly found their calendars eternally full. A community hall pulled its permission without explanation. Then a second. A donor who had promised to fund stipends wrote that his portfolio had rebalanced. Luna's spine felt the language under these moves. "We cannot attack your sentences, but we can starve your rooms." She did not tell Karim first. She called an open-air meeting under the acacia tree outside the church. Teachers arrived. Students, too, for once. She stood on a crate and used no microphone. "They will try to pinch us by the places we stand," she said, "so we will stand where they cannot pinch." She asked who among the teachers had yards, patios, sari-sari stores with space, small places that could hold 10 and a whiteboard. Hands went up. She asked who was willing to host on rotating Saturdays. All hands stayed up. She asked who would need help with chairs. A kid on a bike pedaled away and came back an hour later with 6 metal ones strapped and rattling. Karim arrived halfway through with a face like weather that had seen incoming. He stood at the edge and did not interrupt her. Later he took her aside. "We can use my offices," he said. "We can rent halls." "We will," she said. "But first we will fill these yards. It matters that they cannot close us out of our own homes." He understood. His money made large moves, ones that changed maps all at once. Her strategy was smaller and more stubborn. Many small circles the size of a table that, together, formed a net no hand could tear in one gesture. The quiet chokehold failed. The classes multiplied like vines rising to meet a trellis. The very act of trying to shrink them made them more numerous. A news camera found a class under a carport where the whiteboard was propped against an old refrigerator and a kid's bike and 3 potted calamansi trees. The clip went viral. Comments turned the carport into a shrine. The barangay captain, who had suddenly run out of time, found his phone full of texts from his sister saying, "Why did you cancel my neighbor's class? Why do you not want Ate Liza to learn how to say rest day?